Hi, I'm Amogh Patil, and today I'm here to talk about something that I feel is very important to actually discuss about, right? So, COVID-19. So, obviously, many of us, we did, in fact, live through the global pandemic, right? But what I really wanted to focus on through my research with this project and writing my paper was making connections because I feel that it's very important also to make connections to actually understand the overall impact of the pandemic. So I wanted to see if there was a connection between labor and equity markets. So let's dive straight into it. So first, obviously, many of you guys have received information on COVID-19 throughout like your lives, your daily lives, social media, and these types of things. But I just wanted to give a quick overview. So COVID-19 quickly turned into a global crisis and it affected every single country and their economies worldwide. So over 6.9 million people did in fact lose their lives through the pandemic, and it also caused the global economy to shrink by nearly 3.5%. In early 2020 alone, global stock markets collectively lost $18 trillion in their value. And with this, unemployment rates surged dramatically. That created financial insecurity for millions of people worldwide. So first, let's talk about the stock market, right? So when the stock market in fact tumbles, right, the impacts aren't just within numbers, right? They're people's retirement funds, they're people's personal savings, and their future financial security. So when we analyze major stock indices and we see an impact with them, we can thoroughly understand how that impacted people and their economies in that specific country, right? So during the COVID-19 pandemic, major stock indices around the world saw declines of more than 40%, right? And this eroded investor confidence and prompted a lot of panic selling. That was a very common problem in early 2020 and in late 2019, right? So we saw nations like Germany and Japan that reacted very quickly with their robust government interventions. And this allowed them to stabilize their economies more effectively than others. So for my research, what I did is I analyzed more than 750 values of the adjusted close because my mentor taught me that the adjusted close is a very accurate representation of how an economy is performing at that time. So I looked through Yahoo Finance and through other financial databases to actually get these numbers and turn it into a big, large data spreadsheet where I could actually understand it on a better level. Next, let's talk about the unemployment crisis, right? So the United States experienced a very alarming surge in unemployment at an increase of over 400% because millions of Americans were immediately faced with uncertainty and a lot of economic hardship due to the fact that many people were in fact getting laid off and many people were also unable to work at that time. So, how were countries actually able to mitigate impact of the pandemic on their labor markets, right? And the main way that countries were actually able to do this was through their government, right? So, over in the past history, we understood that when the government intervenes with a company, I mean, with a country's performance, if they're in an economic downturn, they generally have a more positive impact, right? And we could see these with the numbers of the unemployment crisis as well, because countries like South Korea, the UK, and Spain were some of the countries that had heavy government interventions through the usage of furlough schemes and subsidies. So, what are furlough schemes and subsidies, right? Furlough schemes are basically programs where the government helps pay part of a worker's salary if that employer is forced to reduce or stop operations during a crisis. In the case of COVID-19, if the employer is actually unable to even go or step out of their household, then furlough schemes are able to make sure that the worker is still receiving good pension so then they can actually live, right? And secondly, subsidies, right? Subsidies are in fact when the government goes out there, it does in fact provide financial assistance. So this could be through um, the implementation of just giving out money. So they do this to individuals to help them afford essential goods or services. So for the unemployment rates, I looked at different databases, governmental databases, and received more than 300 values of a large time frame between January of 2019 to April of 2021, because I wanted to make sure that the unemployment rate saw a very, very specific dip. Okay, next, let's get into my essential question, right? So I wanted to analyze if the relationship between unemployment and stock market performance is as straightforward as you would assume, right? So before I started my research with this project, I would have just assumed that, oh, when a country faces a crisis and their stock market performance plummets, obviously I feel that their unemployment rate will also increase in correlation to that, right? But there was no clear correlation between unemployment rates and stock performances due to the fact that countries are very different, right? So countries like Germany and Japan, they were countries with very strong government interventions, right? And they experienced a more modest rise in unemployment rates. But this was not connected to their stock market performance. Also, countries that were heavily dependent on sectors like tourism and travel were more vulnerable to the economic shocks of the pandemic because of the fact that they weren't receiving and generating revenue from people that were actually traveling to the country. And a country, for an example of this, is Italy. So, the analysis that I performed revealed that the correlation isn't exactly direct, right? So it reveals that factors such as investor confidence, sector dependency, and government response all play crucial roles in understanding how a country faces a crisis. Okay, so using R, I was able to program and code this graph that represents the relationship between unemployment rate and stock index performance. And before you get into some specific points on the graph, I want you guys to take a look at the line of best fit, which is this blue line going across the middle of the graph. So the line of best fit actually has a slope of 0. So the equation that I coded and came up with is y is equal to 28.28 plus 0x, right? So what does that 0 exactly mean? Because if you've ever taken linear algebra, you understand that the slope represents how the line is growing over time or how it is decreasing over time, right? So when there's a slope of 0, it essentially means that the line is straight, right? So if the line is straight and flat, that technically means that there's no direct correlation between between your x and y value. And that is exactly what we have here. There is no direct correlation between the percent decrease in your adjusted close value and the increase in unemployment. So it actually shows that a higher increase in unemployment doesn't mean a bigger drop in the stock market. And you may ask that this conclusion isn't very drastic, right? But the fact of the matter is that we need to analyze and understand more than 2,000 different values of these representations of a company's economic performance to actually understand, because there's so many outliers, right? We have Vietnam at the very top of this graph. Vietnam had the smallest increase in unemployment, but their stock market still declined greatly. And on the other hand, we have a country like the United States. And we know that the United States always takes generally more heavier hits when it comes to these crises, right? So the United States experienced a huge surge in unemployment and a huge decrease in their stock market performance. And this could be due to the fact of their population or due to the fact of the size of the country as a whole. Okay, so what is the solution to this problem? What COVID-19 truly emphasized is the critical importance of economic resilience. Countries with proactive policies and robust social safety nets and strategic economic plans weathered the storm for far better than other countries did. And resilience isn't just surviving a crisis, right? So it wasn't just coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic doing well. It was about reducing risks, seizing opportunities, and preparing for future shocks. Now, this economic resilience index on the right shows how nations actually evaluate their readiness and how they can actually adapt accordingly. And a country that is on the right of the graph, past the 0 point, is where you want to be at. Okay. In conclusion, COVID-19 has provided us with tough yet essential lessons about preparedness and resilience. So if we want to move forward, our collective goal or the collective goals of these countries should be to advocate for stronger and more effective policies that safeguard employment, stabilize financial markets, and foster global economic resilience. And due to the fact that the relationship between unemployment and stock market performance isn't straightforward, we can understand that different countries need to adapt and different countries need to actually face these problems differently because each country experiences your own unique challenges and your unique outcomes. I want to thank my mentor for his help and his direction in turning this project idea into reality. And because of the fact that he was a more law focused, he studied law, and I actually was trying to talk more about and dive more in depth about finance, but he was really helpful in understanding how we actually are able to understand the COVID-19 pandemic through the economy, right? And not just the fact that there are a lot of debts and not just the fact that many people were able or had to quarantine. I wanted to check the actual stats and the numbers because I'm more of like a numbers and statistics type of person, right? And I wanted to thank my parents as well for helping me be able to code because coding was something that I also wanted to incorporate in my presentation. So, thank you guys for listening. And if you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them.
Great job. So what are the next steps that you want to take with your research?
Yeah. So, the whole basis of this project was for me to like start getting into my research. So, this was more of like a beginner thing for me because I really like statistics and numbers and I really wanted to understand like and make connections. That was something that I was really looking forward to with this project. I wanted to make connections. So I'm definitely going to continue my research, maybe into because I really like looking at stock market performance. So maybe into more sector specific analysis or things of that sort, because I still want to make sure that I'm making these connections.
Very cool. Um, Question in the chat says, do you, sorry, do you think this is something you want to study in college?
Yeah, 100%. So I was very interested in understanding countries and how countries are able to actually come back and how they're able to mitigate problems that they face. And the reason that I decided to pick the stock market is because there's a lot of statistics involved. And I feel like that's really something that I want to major in college and something that I want to continue learning and studying about in the future. So most definitely.
Awesome. Another question. What was the most difficult part of your project? How did you handle it?
Okay, so there was a very big problem that me and my mentor faced in the very early stages of like collecting our data, which was actually being able to find numbers from 2019 and 2020 for the stock market performance and unemployment rates, right? So essentially what he wanted me to do was just look at these Yahoo Finance sites or these financial sites that are giving public information and then just download data between a specific time set, right? But because a lot of countries, like I saw Syria and Iraq and all these countries, they didn't have as much economic information available. I had to go and actually hand pick numbers and look through different websites. And that data collection did take a lot of time, but in the end, I felt it was very worth it because I was able to make the connections.